Thank you for stopping by and listening again. We have a special program that we will replay for you. We call them Encores at the Voice of Bold Business Radio because they were well received, they were incredibly powerful, and they provide immediately useful information for you to use right now. It's worth another listen. I enjoyed it as I listened, and I was choosing it to share with you again. This is the encore of Power Habits with Joy Gutherie. The outcomes of our power habits are easier to grasp than the purpose of them. We all have natural strengths, yet there are habits we can all add that develop our weaknesses and stretch our capabilities to take each action that we choose with certainty. We choose what habits that we make our power habits, not our routines. The skills that we can use for good. Enjoy listening to Power Habits with Joy Gutherie.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
So we were talking just before we went live about what's going on in the world and how fast things change. Our need to adapt is so much more important than ever before just because of the speed of things and our perceived need to respond to those things. And so I was thinking about this concept of power habits, Joy, what these power habits are and how they actually fit in our life and how when we've practiced them, they actually become second nature. So when we are in a place of crazy or change or unexpected, that's hard and overwhelming, those habits, they just kick right in. And I know I asked you a question to prepare for, so I'm going to ask you that question right now, and I cannot wait to hear your answer. What is a power habit, and how do you develop them, Joy?
A power habit really is something that gets you moving in a positive direction. Some of the key things that are power habits, I guess actually the first one is to actually do something. A lot of people who want to give themselves, I guess, a chat to move themselves forward will think about everything that they need to do except for whatever it is that they actually have to do to move forward. So doing something is probably the key first power habit that anyone can have. Taking responsibility if something goes wrong, and that is also something that's very important. Being able to create a plan about where you want to go, then working that plan to make it happen. One of the things that we like to do, I think we've probably done it for the past 10 years or so, is that as we're trying to create a list of things, I'm the type of person who loves to work from lists and check the box when it's done. So as I'm creating a list of things, if I can do something in 2 minutes, just do it. Don't sit there and write it down and prioritize it and try to figure out where it fits in the scheme of things. It can be done in 2 minutes. Just do it. You're going to take more than 2 minutes to fit it in with everything else. So just be a little bit more efficient with how you're getting things done. I think probably another key thing really is to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Beyond eating well and making sure you get good exercise, making sure you sleep, also have fun with what you're doing. If you're not having fun, why do it?
They're all soft skills, Joy, which means we can learn them all, can't we?
All of them can be learned, absolutely.
I love your answer because I thought I was going to have to weave in. How do we get some soft skills? And what are some of these things that we've got to do? Nope, they're right here, ready. Look at that. I think it's great that you said if it only takes 2 minutes and you have 2 minutes, do it. I don't work like that, though. I am not a list checker. I am a big picture person. So for me, it's like, I have 2 minutes. Let me check in with my big picture. But it's true. And now that I know that, it's an amazing thing because I'm like, yeah, all right. And then in the big picture, it usually gets smaller because I'm like, all right, my day is on track. There's not as much to do. And I can see that from the big picture. So I know what to do next. Yeah, no, 2 minutes, I would be doing a quick reflection instead of an action. One of my hashtags is purposeful action. And you actually started with that, do something. Tell us more about that. What do you mean by do something?
I think actually doing this podcast today is actually a real key example for that. When you asked me whether or not I would be willing to participate in an upcoming one, I'm like, oh, gee, I'm not an expert in that topic. I'm not really sure if I would be the right person for you to talk to. That's actually one of the things that holds you back, is that you become your own worst critic. Just get out there, do it. Do it, learn about it, go forward with, figure out what it is that I've done to try to move myself forward, and then share that with others. Maybe that can be helpful for them too. I just decided, I said, I'll let you know the next day whether or not I'll do this. I thought about it overnight, and I'm like, well, why are you holding yourself back here? Just do it. So do something is my first.
I think that is so great. And if it fits into your initiatives and it doesn't take away and it's not shiny object syndrome, why not? I'm totally with you in all of that, Joy, because man, it's amazing what we can do when we decide. That would actually be one of the things when I was thinking about power habits. I'm like, make that first choice. Thinking about it versus checking it off, depending on which perspective we're coming from, could be procrastination. It could be avoidance, yet it could be the exact thing that we're supposed to do too. So really recognizing that within ourselves of what is a procrastinative moment? What is something that we're like, I'm not so sure, which really means, yeah, you better do that, right? That's just what you were saying.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes it's that we're so busy trying to say, okay, well, I can't decide between these 5 great ideas. Which one should I move forward with? Let me analyze each of them in some detail to figure out, just pick one. Just pick one and go for it. You'll find out in doing that option what didn't work. It will, even if it's a failure, it will teach you which one of the next options would be the best one to go for.
I'm thinking about the organizations that I work with, and I know you will have had similar situations. And so to just look back and reflect, it is amazing. People are worried about making the wrong choice. They're in this role of leader. They're in this role of authority where they're responsible and accountable to the success of this business. And if they make the wrong choice, then they've got this problem. And they really don't have a problem. I mean, that's what you just said. They don't really have a problem. It's cool. We thought that was the right choice. Turns out it's not. So let's choose something different. I think that's an important power habit in terms of recognizing we can always choose something different.
Always choose something different, always. And sometimes your choice is the wrong choice, but it's still a choice. Take it, learn from it, move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're talking around this concept of what the purpose of power habits are. And I know when you started your answer, you said to move in a positive direction. Is that the true purpose, or is that just an outcome of the purpose of having power habits?
Well, you have an excellent point, really. That really is more of the outcome than the true purpose. A purpose really of a power habit, I think, is something more along the lines of, gosh, I'm not sure exactly how to phrase this. Make yourself bigger than you think you might be.
Okay, so I'm new to Colorado, meaning I've been here just under 2 years, okay? And we have mountain lions. And so here comes my son home from school one day, and he goes, I know what to do when we see a mountain lion, Mama. And this is relevant because I'm like, ooh, it never occurred to me we might run into a mountain lion, even though we're here and we see pictures of them on our local websites all the time. And I'm like, really? How is that? And he goes, well, for a kid, you got to get between an adult's legs because you can't be seen. And then it's up to the adult to be as big as possible. So realistically, it's this concept of like pre-fight or flight. So this is why it came to mind when you were talking about improvement or being bigger than yourself is, okay, here's this place. I'm feeling anxiety. We're feeling anxiety. There's this unknown ahead, and I have no choice but to go forward because whatever's behind me is gone.
You get back actually to the heart of really what a habit is. A habit really is about having something fundamentally practiced that you know how to do so that when you encounter a situation that may be different or similar, you can at least have something to fall back on to actually spur you to take some specific type of action. So in the case of the mountain lion, you learned what you could do in the event there was a mountain lion there. Oop, there's a mountain lion, or there's a bear, something similar. What can you do? Now, it's not necessarily true for all bears. I learned when I went to Alaska, you don't necessarily want to make yourself big. For some of them, you do. You want to make yourself really, really big for some types of bears. For others, you want to play dead. So it really just depends.
It does depend. Having that frame of reference, though, is so important. When I think of the purpose of power habits, when you said move in a positive direction, I was like, yeah, it's like setting the tone. It's like it's making a choice before any choice has to be made. It's a personal choice, that concept of self-care. And I'm going to add self-awareness to what you were saying, because when we know what we're trying to do and we are choosing specific habits to do every day, maybe it's a morning routine, maybe it's an after dinner or a bedtime routine. It could be whatever it is, a Monday or a Friday thing, but that one thing that we are incorporating and we never let go ever. Whatever else is going on in the world, that thing becomes an anchor for us. And right. To me, that allows us to have an awareness of what the purpose is. It is to be anchored, to have some place to be able to stop and go, breathe, or take a look out, or go, okay, what do I actually have here? Whether it's structure, perception, or behavior, that whatever we need to do, but it sets us up for that.
It's an interesting choice of word that you chose as an anchor, because an anchor is kind of contradictory to soaring, right? Power is more about going upwards, right? And a habit is more about staying grounded. So mixing the two of them together is kind of interesting. It's fascinating that you stay grounded while trying to move upward and basically more positively.
We have the wrong kind of power there. And so what was coming to mind as you were talking about soaring in a positive direction, yet being anchored to know that we're in the positive direction we want to be, that juxtaposition. Sometimes the whole purpose of a power habit is to help us see bad habits we may be creating around ourselves inadvertently. It comes back to, in my opinion, some self-awareness. We're talking about responsibility also. Okay, I get to choose what actions I'm taking all the time. Are these actions that I am using to set my course the correct set for me right now? And it makes me wonder, do you think, and in your experience and in your observation, are power habits the same for everybody?
No, absolutely not. There are people out there who write about, these are the 7 power habits, these are the 12, these are the 15, these are the 21 power habits. And using those, if you don't have some, if you use those as your baseline to developing your own, I think that's great. But for me personally, I mean, you said that you're a big picture person. I'm saying that I'm a list kind of person. I like to work off of a list. Those are two different very ways of approaching things. We wouldn't necessarily have the same habits to make those things successful.
We're actually really not talking about routines here, which is why you haven't heard us say, here are the 10 things that we see successful people do before breakfast or whatever it is. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the habits that we have in our life and how we're showing up to each situation as we go, which is a different kind of habit. It's a different kind of living, and it's definitely a different kind of leading. Structure is important, and we all need a place to start. And Joy, you were saying that. I brought books. I brought books because there are a couple of different ways. We've got, right, this concept. This is a book that I read, The Millionaire Teacher. It's a teacher making a teacher's salary, created his retirement, and came up with this process that was tried and true. And he did it with other teachers and found that it worked. Andrew Hallman came up with a habit. He came up with a list of things to do to get to the big picture and all of the elements that were necessary. So it doesn't matter where we start from, we could still learn from and use something like this in our life. And so I'm bringing these up, yes, I like the books. They don't necessarily pertain to what we're talking about. They pertain to creating a system that gives us the positive forward momentum. And then we've got this one. I mean, Think and Grow Rich. But when was the last time you read this one, Joy?
Oh, it's been a while, probably when it first came out.
Okay, so here's the thing, and I just opened this to one of my earmarked written on pages, and it's chapter 7, The Organized Planning. The crystallization of desire into action. I think we need to come back and talk about that, because regardless of big picture or checklist person or making sure all the pieces are there to build with, there's an element of this when we're talking about action and the whole object of moving forward, reaching those goals, being able to clearly set those initiatives. And then the last book that I brought, which I think you'll like, is, I'm guessing you've read this. My dust jacket is gone, but it's The Go-Giver.
I have not read that one.
Bob Burg's The Go-Giver. These are 5 just practical habits that and he calls them laws in here, and he tells a story what the go-giver means. So you'll be more productive, you'll be more profitable, you'll make more money when you do these 5 things. They're all common courtesy things. So none of the things that I have actually shared here are, this is the way you do it to get it done. All of these in 3 very different venues are ways to consider we're showing up in the world and reflect of how we can take advantage of something like the go-giver, where he's got the law of influence. Your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. That's just one. I mean, how cool is that? To actually take a moment to not only acknowledge, but to maybe put ourselves in somebody else's shoes and recognize what they need. That's a very positive thing to do. It's a very personal and group awareness. Do you have any books that talk about this concept of the skills needed to create the habits that we want as an individual?
The Art of Possibility by Benjamin and Rosamund Zander, one of my all-time favorite books, basically outline ways in which you should think about possibility, or what can be and how to get there. One of the key things that they talk about is how people tend to go into these downward spirals. And they tend to start out with this big plan of where they're going, and then encounter an obstacle, and so they start thinking very poorly about things, and then another obstacle comes, and we can't make this happen, we can't pull this off. So basically how to right that boat around, think more positively about it, and move forward.
And that's called The Art of Possibility.
The Art of Possibility by Rosamund and Benjamin Zander. Benjamin Zander is, or was, he might still be, the conductor of the Boston Philharmonic. Just a fascinating person. If you ever had the chance to watch him speak, go. He's fantastic.
Their discoveries come from their life experience and their work, which is not theoretical. It's based in action and being out there. So that's one of the things that I really like about that too, because I think if I had done the show Power Habits even 5 years ago, definitely 10 or 20 years ago, if I was just starting out in my career, my perspective would be really different. So as you were talking, thinking about the art of possibility, it became clear to me. I was like, oh yeah, so we grow and change. So to acknowledge where we are on our path, because 20 years ago, I was 19, and at 19, I had a whole different set of things I needed to do and thrive to encounter the world and to tackle it and achieve what I thought I needed to achieve based off of my life experience and my reflection. I'm looking back and I'm like, okay, what would have the power habits been of a 19-year-old Jessica? I really think it would have been elusive, because the things that I would have perceived as powerful, meaning being able to create some sort of an impact, are very different than what my life experience since then has taught me. Command the presence of a room. Okay, that was a power habit. What does that actually look like? How does that work? Well, you don't just know, and that's when we have to figure out, because it works with our personality. It works with the people that are in the room with us, and it works with how we choose to approach problem solving. And are we open, or are we a little more authoritarian in our approach? I know I've said this before on other shows, probably not with you, Joy, but I used to be very authoritarian because I thought I needed to demand and hold my space and put my stake in the ground. And realistically, man, woman, young or old, that limits very quickly. Can you think of a time or a story where you ended up limiting yourself by the way you approached a situation?
Absolutely. I think maybe everybody has that. For me personally, the one that always comes to mind is I was a fairly new manager managing a program that dealt with all the laptops for a telecom company that was throughout the U.S. So we were coast to coast, and our sales force needed to get laptops. They didn't have them. I was managing that laptop process, and I was focused on making sure that there were a set of rules that everybody had to abide by to get these laptops and to turn them back in when salespeople left, refurbish them, and then send them back out. I was so focused on those rules that I wasn't really paying attention to the needs of the different communities of salespeople out there. So that the rules that I had established focused on a PC and not the sales force out there and how they were dealing with customers and the level of customers that they were dealing with, those who were dealing with the customers bringing in the most money versus those that had a whole lot of customers, but they had very small pockets. I basically had to go up in front of the top brass of the company and explain what I was doing. And they said, well, whose fault is this? Blah, blah, blah. Why are you doing it this way? And literally my boss kind of stepped in front of me at this point. This was the biggest learning moment for me. He said, it's my responsibility. I'm like, but it's my rule. I did this. I put this in place. I'm the one that made this happen. He's like, it's my responsibility. I'll take care of it. We'll make sure that we create something that works better for everybody around the country. And that was a huge learning moment for me.
That boss's power habit was responsibility. This is where I draw the line. This is what my involvement is. And here's how it goes forward. Oh my gosh. We have to take a quick station break. This is the Voice of Bold Business Radio, and I'm here with Joy Gutherie. And I have to tell you, we are having such a powerful conversation about habits, and this is actually called Power Habits. You got into this just a little bit. You started to allude it. So this is the perfect tie-in, Joy. Why do we need them? What if we just developed a skill and we were really good technicians and we were just okay with where we were and very content? Do we even need power habits?
There are some people who really don't want to have a way to be out there in the limelight. They don't want people to know about them. They don't want people to know that they exist. They want to be the man behind the curtain that you can't see in the little box on the screen. They really want to be the people who are away from the action. For maybe those people, it might be the case that having a power habit is not necessarily the way to move forward, or actually sets of power habits. Very few people just rely on one. For some people, it's about interpersonal communication, though. And so they're focused on, being big when they go in the room and raising their arms out and taking up a lot of space, or setting up a specific location in the office where they want to be, or the table that they want to be at, or maybe they actually define the whole power habit thing differently, that it's more about my power and keeping my power within me without having to share my power with everyone else. So I will keep the things that I'm learning internally, and I'll go share those with people when I want to share them, but I don't have to share them just because you say I do. So the difference between people who want to be more communal, people who want to be more internal, I don't think there's anything wrong with those differences. I just think that there are differences.
If somebody is a little nervous, they're coming and they're talking about something that they might not feel like they're an expert at, or it's their first time doing something, or they know they messed up and they're trying to figure out how to own it. The best thing that I can do as a mentor, as a colleague, as an equal, as a peer, is to be consistent. And somebody's going to know, if I said I was going to be there, I'm going to be there. And if I said I was going to do something, I'm going to do it. That's really where the behind the scenes are still very detail oriented. And in some cases, for somebody who's not used to doing those things or doesn't have strong skills in that area, will really rely on that internal communication person, the one who likes to be behind the scenes, that understands at a different level what's going on than somebody who has a different innate strengths and has chosen to develop other skills. What would you add to that?
You want to have people who have all these different skills on your team. If you have everybody who wants to do the same thing, you're going to have a lot of infighting. So having the diversity of skills, the diversity of personalities will probably end up making whatever it is that you're doing stronger.
You're so awesome at this. I have no idea if you know that, but that just brings us right back into this chapter 7 of this Think and Grow Rich, right? That I snagged and I was like, oh yeah, this page. I opened it up to this perfect page. Our crystallization of desire and putting it into action. So this is a concept of a plan, which is a skill that you chose at the beginning to be one of the higher ranked ones for being a power habit. It's interesting about this approach to failure, about bringing people together and having some accountability partners, which also comes to the realm of being mentored or seeking out a mentor and mentoring. What that looks like is maybe it's a question. Maybe the concept of formalizing a plan and getting real clear about what is actually being sought comes from us in the position of witness or hearing or confidant or mentor or boss even. because we have this moment where we can just give advice, but we also have a moment where could that advice and experience be mixed with a question to let the person who is approaching us have a little bit more reflection and make sure they're as clear as they need to be.
I'm all for creating that plan to tell everybody who's working on something what it is that needs to be accomplished. When you start saying specifically what task everybody needs to be doing or how something needs to be done, you kind of blur the lines between being boss and between being very authoritarian again. If you want more creativity, you want more diversity, you want a more robust answer, you want an answer that's going to not just deal with that PC in my example, but with the overall answer, an answer that's bigger than one that you can come up with by yourself. You really want everybody involved. I think you want everyone's best power habit.
Teaching somebody the power to choose, practicing the power to choose is sometimes what an entire team, an entire company, an entire movement needs for things to move forward.
Right.
Everybody can have ideas. Everybody can come up with solutions to problems. Everybody can bring their own skill sets to it. Until the actual solution is chosen or the next best step to discover the right solution has been chosen, all it is talk. And so that concept of taking whatever it is, because even for me in the big picture, we can all get out here. And at some point, I'm just like, all right, already, let's just act. What are we doing?
As a group, you can choose to create a power habit of how you choose.
Yes. Now, have you done that in some variation with teams before?
I've done it on a very small scale where we were trying to reorganize a group in a fairly large organization, and we wanted everybody to have input. So we had to try to decide how we were going to decide. We had the way that we wanted to decide and how we wanted to do things. In the end, some of it didn't matter. The boss had a point of view and that was it. But for everything else, we were able to give the boss some information he didn't have before because of the process we decided to choose from. In my current business, for every project, every customer action we take, we do an after-action review. Have you ever done after-action reviews?
I call it more of just a general review, so I'm interested to hear what makes you call it the after-action.
We use the model actually that was primarily set up by the U.S. Army in the early 80s, and it is really focused on trying to show specifically what was supposed to happen, what actually happened, what is the difference between those two, and what accounts for those differences. So basically what you can learn from all those things. It's a non-judgmental, by judgmental I mean a non-pointing fingers way of saying, here's why something didn't go the way we expected it to go. So what we can learn from that so that when we, in the future, when we take a similar step, we can take that lesson that we learned from that and move forward. So it specifically takes what was supposed to happen, what actually happened, where are the differences, what accounts for those differences, what can we learn from that?
Our Army's been around for a long time, and they are great. This is the thing. When we look at lasting organizations that rely on structure and creativity within structure to see that done over and over and over again, and you see the results of that over and over and over again. Wow. So we're talking about processes, and we're talking about the power to choose and having a process of knowing how to choose, or a decision about how decisions are going to be made. And I love that we're using the same word for both things because it makes you think a little bit. Why do I have to decide to decide?
Well, how many marriages could be saved if they only could figure out how to decide where we're going out for dinner tonight?
We've got a 50% chance of success in marriage. In business, it's a little worse. No, it might be a lot worse, right? The first 2 years, 80% of businesses that start will fail. Right. And of that 20% that survive, only 30% of those original survivors of the first 2 years will make it 10. There's only ways to go up here. I mean, we could go down, but that's a whole other conversation that I don't think anybody is willing to think about because we've got the base. We can work up from that. Putting together a process to be able to understand what's going on, because business owners, founders, teams, sometimes differences are overlooked in terms of the goals and the outcomes and the vision of what and where a company is going. If it's not looked at, if it's not constantly evaluated and talked about using, we're going to even say this after action model, that would be a perfect example of that too. A place to use this model is, all right, here's where I'm at. Here's where I'm at. This is where I see us going. This is where I see us going. And we could actually apply it to what's happening in an organization right now, in addition to after the fact. Sure, I might be able to pick better partners next time. Sure, that other person might be able to pick better partners next time. But in the end, what if it was part of the process of coming together and just evaluating and looking? And I use the word evaluate, which makes people cringe. So maybe just reflect. The reflection of, here's where we're at, here's where we're going. Are there gaps that we're going to be facing going forward? And can we reduce any chasms? Because if we can't, wouldn't it be awesome to figure out a plan to work around it before it became a crisis?
Power habit for a man, literally, when he goes into a conference room, he spreads out, spreads those arms. He makes a big space. If he's got a lot of power in the organization, he's going to be doing that. A lot of women that you see come into meetings, they kind of hunker down in on themselves. They got their little pad and they're like right here, or they've got their notebook right in front of them, whether it's a computer or a piece of paper, and they're ready to go, but trying to be kind of quiet, trying not to get involved. And if they want to get a little bit more loud in some of the meetings, by loud I mean if they want to be more active in the meeting, then sometimes they can come off as being too strident, because that's how women are perceived. They're perceived as being strident when they speak up.
A woman is out there. She has started her own company, or she's working her way up her career ladder within her organization. She faces this constant pushback. I liked your word loud, not noticeable. She is making impact, whether she says something or not. Whatever she does is going to have some result that usually moves everybody in a positive direction. The relationships that she has with people are stronger and obvious when they're walking through the office and having those true, genuine connections with people. Then they get into this small confined room and it's almost like they're a whole different person. Have you ever had this experience that you could reflect on and share with us to give us some advice, or just things that you know of that you help other women practice?
I've talked to women about it before, about making sure that they speak up and have their voices made known, their points of view made known. But women have to go into it generally. I hate talking in such big generalizations because it's not true for everybody, but women do tend to go into it more with a plan. They're going into a meeting where they want to be loud, when they want to make a point, when they want to be bigger than they have been representing themselves before. They basically have to create that plan to pull it off. Now, men would have to do that too if they've been the quiet ones in the background, but they create a plan to pull it off. Problem with something like that tends to be is that can look too scripted. It can look more like I memorized my lines, I've said my lines. So it needs to be more dynamic instead of so planned and so structured that you kind of lose the interest of the other people in the room.
So you're talking about this fine line of actually maybe a power habit that we're talking about here is the ability to see the outcome and figure out what we're doing in each step of the way to build that plan. And then letting whatever happens, knowing here are the high points. This is where I refuse to change. This is where I'm going to hold ground. This is because this is what is important to me right here, right now. I think there are some men that fall into this category that feels like any confrontation at any level is a problem and they shy away from that, could use the benefit of a power habit of having a plan. What am I doing? Why am I here? What are the points I want to make? And I don't have to be allowed to do it. I just have to make sure before I go, I've said my piece. That's a hard one to practice, but man, I'll bet it would serve people well, because influence isn't by the person who has the biggest space on the table that takes up the most space all the time. Influence can come from the person who says nothing in the room, but by their body language or sitting up a little straighter or checking their phone, changes the tone of the entire room. Understanding that plan and who we're talking to and who we are in that space makes a difference too.
Power and influence are related. They are not the same. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about influence related to an outcome, you can be in a meeting where everybody does the nod, they say, yes, we're all on board, and they go out of the room, and then 5 minutes later you find out there's a completely different decision involved, because the real people with influence who are involved in the meeting got to talking about what they really should have said in the session.
Another potential power habit is speaking up and speaking clear, and maybe asking for clarity. How else do we know if we've made our point? How else do we know if everything that we've prepared for was heard and potentially relevant, or figuring out what was heard and what we shared that was not relevant, so that we can go back to the drawing board and learn? Because what will we have? We'll have more of the idea of what's going on. Somebody will clue us in and be like, you're forgetting about this piece over here of what we need to be thinking about. Or, oh, by the way, there was a new development since we last talked that changes this. It's not always a lack on our part. It's that stuff changes. Why are power habits a bold thing to consider and develop? And maybe that's it, being prepared.
I like where you started in the beginning, where you've got the anchor, you've got your feet solidly based in your values of your business, of your company, but you know powerfully where you would like to go, where you would like to advance, where you'd like to go toward. So if you have habits in place that can help you decide, that can help move you forward, I think those are things that are very helpful.
You will find all of the program notes at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P73. That is voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 73. You can also search for Power Habits. Joy and I talked about a lot today. I mean, we talked about the purpose of power habits. Are they the same for everybody? Do we really need them? Couldn't we get along without having power habits? How do we practice them? How do we build them? What are these things that are elusive? And the big spoiler, which is not a spoiler anymore, is that my list is going to be different than your list. And what I need in my business and my role as leader is going to be different than what you need and what your role requires of you as a leader in your business. I want you to subscribe and rate this program. Let Joy and I know. Respond. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, what you see as being different, what you would add, because it's through our conversation of how we are adding and showing up to work every single day that defines what being a leader in today's marketplace means and is and represents to those around us. We lead by example, whether or not anybody is watching. I want you to share with us, how do you realize success using your power habits?
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.